Hey, welcome back to the Come Holy Spirit podcast. I am Tom Wynn, and I'm joined with my dear friend Daniel Ordonez.
Hello, how's it going? I'm excited to get this rolling today. A little bit earlier than we recorded last time, which is great. But I'm so excited, especially with what we're getting into today.
Yeah, today we are kind of digging into this crazy life of Padre Pio. But
Yeah.
before we do that, Daniel, I'm very interested to hear about how your silent retreat went.
Oh my goodness. Yes, the silent retreat. It was really cool. As you guys heard last week a little bit, I was getting ready to enter into my silent retreat. Again, very loud life, very loud person. And it was so good. I was a little nervous at first to get into all of silence, honestly, right? I was like, what am I going to do? We can't have our phones. We can't have our laptops. We can't do homework. I went on a lot of walks, but it was so good. And the fear that I had going into it quickly fell away when I started all this time in prayer. And not to say that I would become a monk or that I'm called to, but I understand a little bit a lot of the silence and prayer that they have. And obviously, I understand that's not all that they do, but they do spend a lot of time in silence as well. And I was able to write. I was, like I said, able to go to a walk. I walked like 8 miles. It was great. And on top of that, I definitely was able to pray a lot of rosaries and just have a lot of time with Mary and with the Lord. And I 10 out of 10 would recommend. I had not gone without my phone for more than 24 hours in like almost 5 years. So here we are. It's great.
I think I'm gonna be convinced to go on a silent retreat simply for the fact of I think a lot, but I also talk a lot, and then being on my phone way too much, like my screen time seems way too toxic for me. So I think you're gonna convince me to get on to this silent retreat kind of train here.
You definitely should, because it was such a joy. And then when it finished, so the rule was like obviously we could start talking again once we got to our apostolate assignment. Everybody else was for mass, but ours, we are sacristans, Sam and I, at St. Anne's. As soon as we got there, it's funny, the car ride there, we were still dead silent. As soon as I parked the car, I was like, can we talk now? I was like, is this a thing? But it's actually really such a joy being able to turn off the phone and put it away. And sometimes you're like, wow, I wish I could just do this all the time, which obviously I know we can't, right? We need them for some things. I understand, but definitely has helped me to desire using it for unnecessary things more. But yeah, while I was doing that, how was your weekend? I heard you went to like, I don't know, you like were in a fire or something.
What? No, I was supposed to go skydiving, and a funny story, in July, myself and a couple of the city staff members, we planned to go skydiving, but supposedly the airport ran out of gas. I've never heard of an airport running out of gas, so we were like,
How do
okay,
you run out of gas at an airport?
right? So yeah, supposedly that weekend they ran out of gas. It was wild. But so we were like, okay, let's reschedule it for September. So we rescheduled into September, and literally the day before we were supposed to go, I get a text from the company, and they're like, where you guys are jumping at, it's gonna be a little bit too windy, so we're gonna have to cancel. So either one, this
Wow.
is like a crazy sign from God to not go skydiving, or two, and adversity strikes. What are you gonna do? You just keep trying. Like that's where I'm torn at.
Jeez. Wait, so then what did you do instead?
Well, what I did instead was I went to help with an airport training. Sometimes we have this mass scale airport scenario trainings of like, well, if a plane crashed, how do the firefighters, how do the police, how do EMS, how does the airport respond? So I was one of the victims. I ended up having supposedly
Oh.
had big burns on my arms and my face was cut. But it was a joy. And then we had like fake Karens trying to yell at the airport security and fake news press trying to barge in and try to take pictures of the airplane. It was such a fun chaos to have.
That's okay. This makes more sense. So you weren't in a fire, you were in a fake fire. Okay.
Yeah, fake fire. But someone's life who has faced a lot of weird things, like from all the way to being in two places at once, to levitating, to having Jesus' wounds on his hands, to all of these crazy miracles and mysteries is Saint Padre Pio. So I personally don't know much of Padre Pio's history, but I do know a lot of the stories. Can you share his background and how he became a priest, a Capuchin?
And what's so awesome, obviously you guys are hearing this potentially on a Monday when we release this, which tomorrow is his feast day, right? And Padre Pio, it was a perfect, I think, thing to start off with. But yeah, he became a priest very long time ago. It was back in 1887, and he was born in a really small farming village in southern Italy. And by the time he was 15, he actually ended up becoming a Capuchin Franciscan, very young, right? I was thinking what I was doing when I was 15. And I mean, I was a sophomore in high school playing the trumpet. I was like, I don't even know. That
Yeah.
was, yeah, that'd be wild to me being a Franciscan at that age. And what I found out was kind of crazy. So Padre Pio actually became a priest when he was 23 years old, which is
Wow.
how old I am now. So the age that I entered seminary, which is obviously very recently this year, he became a priest, which is wild to me. And for like the first 8 years or so, lived a pretty normal priest life. He had a lot of illness, just a normal like priest life. Wasn't all this like big name Padre Pio that he is now. But yeah, it was a very humble start to his priesthood.
I would add that when he became a priest, this was like in the midst of World War One, and so he was actually, I think he was actually drafted to go to war for Italy, and turns out he had tuberculosis, and so they were like, "Well, dude, you cannot survive out here. Like you're literally going to die before you get onto the battlefield." So they sent him home,
Jeez.
and it's just really weird to think like this small poor farmer boy desired poverty. Like that's what captions are all about. They wear a brown robe, they choose poverty, and they choose a life of prayer. And that's just crazy to me, especially for his dad, who at some point went to the United States, to Jamaica, New York, just to work to provide and send money back home to Italy. Like they did not have an easy life at all, in my opinion.
Wow. And you think about like the time too, like getting over to New York all the way from Italy is not an easy feat. You just can't be like, oh, I'm going to get a plane ticket and just fly over. Wow. It's kind of funny. It reminds me of Captain America when he was like trying to serve the country and be a soldier, and they kept telling him no because I mean he had a lot of illnesses. But it's cool. Padre Pio ended up going and serving in a way different way, right, and becoming a priest. That's so cool. It was really awesome about why I said like the first 8 years were kind of normal. There was one day, it was in 1918. So now he's like 31 years old, a little bit older, been a priest for a minute, which again, that's so weird because that'll be around the time that I would become a priest if I did, like 30, 31. And while he was praying before the crucifix, that is when the first time he had received the stigmata. I don't know, Tom, you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, what even that is? Kind of fancy word too.
The stigmatas are what we call the wounds of Christ, like the actual wounds in which Christ was nailed to the cross, the wounds on his hands and wounds on his feet. But for Padre Pio, they were the wounds on his hands. And those wounds never healed. Like he received a vision from the Lord. And once he received that vision, he also received the stigmatas on both of his hands. And at first, I'm like, all right, maybe he just has like some weird medical condition that just doesn't let himself heal. Like my dad, when he had a stroke, like if my dad got the slightest cut, it was really hard for the cut to heal. So I'm like, well, maybe
Yeah.
Padre Pio had that. But Padre Pio also, Saint Padre Pio also had surgery, and he had surgery close to his neck too, and that wound healed after
Yeah.
surgery. So it was something that medicine, even now, could not explain. But he was constantly bleeding. He had that bandaged up. But what I wonder though, Daniel, is I wonder what people at the time thought. And I wonder what, I guess, his superior priests thought, his bishops thought. Like this normal guy, normal priest, all of a sudden receives these holy marks on his hands.
Yeah, they were definitely really skeptical, right? Doctors were skeptical. And it was what was really interesting though is that he has literally these, I mean, these holes in his hands, right? Stigmata is like the representation of showing the holes in Jesus's hands and feet, right? And they never got infected. And he had these wounds. Like Tom talked about how like he had surgery and that healed. And while he had these wounds on his hands that are wide open, never infected. And what was really crazy, and what people were skeptical when they would hear about, but when people would meet him, when he would bleed, the wounds would smell like roses and violets. Isn't
But
that crazy? Right. So imagine like you go and you like scrape your knee and like all of a sudden you start smelling flowers and it's December. There's no flowers outside. But yeah, it was definitely, and we're gonna get into this a little bit more too, but there was a lot of gifts that he had outside of just the stigmata, but the church and a lot of people outside of people that even knew him were super skeptical, just of, I mean, of everything, right?
so yeah, for me, it seems like Christ just doesn't give these gifts to anybody. He doesn't just give these gifts to an old normal Joe on the street. But so far from what I can tell from Padre Pio's life is he just lived a really prayerful life. He prayed a lot and he listened to the Lord a lot. And as I think of these wounds, I think of he had them for almost his whole life, only until maybe a little bit before his death. And you would assume if you have wounds for that long that are open, they would be infected and they would stink. But even people who went into his confessional could smell the fragrance, the odor of sanctity that he gave off. So supposedly he was in his confessional 12 to 15 hours a day. Do you know much about that, Daniel?
Yeah, it was it's kind of crazy because again, he had all these gifts and one of them was actually the ability to read souls. And Padre Pio obviously knowing this but in his humility just wanted to bring as many people the sacrament of confession as possible, right? And he wanted to be able to have that like opportunity for people as much as he could, which is kind of crazy. I mean, we're recommended probably what 7 to 8 hours of sleep every day. And a lot of the times he would literally be in the confessional for the entire time he was awake. And yeah, obviously people would tell him their sins, but in this as well, there's a lot of times where people would tell them their sins and he would literally bring up a sin that they didn't even know, or they did know, but that they didn't even say out loud. He's like, hey, what about this? Which is, I think to me is just that's just another crazy gift of the spirit to just be able to read their soul and know that there's something maybe they're holding back or something that has been on their heart that they've been struggling with that they didn't even know that they should bring to the Lord. They were scared to.
Padre Pio calls confession, he says confessional, like the confession is the soul's bath. You must go at least once a week. And he says, I do not want souls to stay away from confession more than a week because those that are even clean, the spaces in your heart that are unoccupied will gather dust. And so, how often do we vacuum our house? More than sometimes more than once a week. So then we ought to spend more time confessing our sins to the Lord, confessing our sins in the confessional, because he knew that there was just something different in the hearts of the people that came to confession to him. That they weren't just looking for, oh, I want to feel God's forgiveness. No, they were looking for someone to see them and love them and for them to be honest. I think that's the hardest thing about when we sin is that it's so hard for us to be honest and come face to face with what the Lord truly and actually desires for us.
And it's definitely things like this that have convicted me a lot to be able to want to go to confession more. Because I feel like for a while it'd be a very long time in between. I remember I was having a conversation with a mutual friend of ours actually, and he would go to confession every week. And I remember being like, dude, every week, like that's kind of wild. And a good point that he had made, he's like, well, I mean, JP2 went to confession every day. And it's like the two perspectives, like, well, he was a pope. Obviously he went every day. But also it's like, wait, he's a pope and he went to confession every day. What am I doing? Right. So yeah, Padre Pio's desire for that for people and just like like I said, the ability to just want to offer his entire day to just let people come to Jesus through him is such a humble way to live life.
Yeah, people lined up for hours, for days, and some people even waited weeks just to go to confession with St. Padre Pio. When I think of someone who does so much good, I think of the little pest that we call the devil who tries to work harder to take away a good soldier that St. Padre Pio is and was for the faith. So, as I know correctly, what I've heard in the past is that Padre Pio went face to face grueling battles, physical battles with the devil. Do you have any
Yes.
stories on that, Daniel?
Yeah, while he was there where he was living, a lot of the other Franciscans, they would literally hear him like battle with demons. They would like hear the terrifying noises coming from the cell that he had lived in. And literally sometimes like he would even like have bruises and he'd be bloodied up, which again, when he's bleeding, he smells like roses. So it's like bittersweet. But yeah, they said they were demonic attacks. And it was, I mean, you just have somebody that has all these gifts, and when we do good, and when we have good, the devil just wants to take that away. So now, if you imagine somebody that is doing as much good as Padre Pio is doing, and still does, right? The devil hates that and can take it up notches, and it's really interesting to think about. And I was reflecting on this the other day. The same devil that tempts us and has us fall into these little sins that sometimes we like kind of just fall into so easily is the same devil that goes and was attacking Padre Pio, the same devil that goes and does all these horrible things. And sometimes we just like let ourselves fall into that temptation so easily. It's a, yeah, it's a scary game for sure. But yeah,
St. Padre Pio gives us an example that it can be done. Like when I'm
yeah,
tempted, I'm like, well, frick, there's no way I can beat what I'm feeling. But Padre
yeah,
Pio gives a good example. And not to take the spotlight away from you, Daniel, but there's this really good excerpt from one of the biographies of Padre Pio, written by Father Amorth. And he gives us kind of like the different ways the devil physically appeared to Padre Pio. Because for me, I think of the devil as like this horned creature and is throwing spitting fire everywhere. But the devil is clever and the devil uses good things to tempt us. For example, like sometimes the devil came to Padre Pio in a black cat, and other times the devil would come to St. Padre Pio as a naked young girl or a very provocative young girl just to try to test his chastity, just to try to see if he could fall into lust. Or even really uh, awful times, the devil would even pose as Jesus or pose as Mary or pose as Saint Francis and give him all these revelations and messages to just throw him off. But I just can't imagine how Padre Pio kept winning these battles over and over and over again.
and it's just that's the power of Jesus and the power of him loving Christ so much that even with all the struggles spiritually that you're talking about, he still pursued through because it wasn't about him. And it's crazy, like, even with all of these spiritual battles that he still had a lot of battles, like, not even physically with demons, but like with people as well. And not physical battles, but just while he was had his life here on earth, there was people that were kind of after him, right? Even the church that he dedicated his life to. I mean, a lot of times they didn't even believe him, and they didn't believe these miracles, and they didn't believe the idea that he could read souls. And it even got to the point where a lot of times they would ban him from having mass and ban him from doing confessions. And the humble servant that he is for the Lord obviously submitted and obviously was like, okay, like I'm just going to keep praying. I'm going to keep following Christ in these ways. I'm going to keep doing everything that he wants me to do, even though there's all this that's against me, which I think is such a powerful perspective from him for sure.
It's in his humility that I think allowed him to take the edge on the most prideful creature, the devil. And something that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around is this is a good and faithful servant. Yet the
Yeah.
Lord allowed him to be tempted. The Lord allowed him to be drawn into these battles. And all I can think of is the Lord did that not just for the sake of saying, look, I have a really good and faithful servant. Do whatever you can to him, but he is still going to choose me. Not only just that, but it seems to me that the Lord drew St. Padre Pio deeper into a relationship with Jesus. And he also gives us this example of, whoa, if I can do it and it was much worse for me, then you can do it with the little that um, you might be feeling in your temptation. Uh, but I do hear that not only did he have these stigmatas, these really difficult battles, constant battles with the devil, but that he could basically teleport.
Yeah, this is actually so crazy. So, as Tom talked about a little bit earlier, Padre Pio, obviously born around the time of World War One, he was actually a priest during the time of World War Two, and there were some pilots, and they were sent out to go bomb this town. And little did they know, and they didn't know until much later, this town that they were about to bomb was actually the town where Padre Pio lived. And you just think about this, right? What this bombing would have caused, right? Probably the death of Padre Pio a lot sooner, unless there was a different type of miracle. But as they were on their way over to this town and they were preparing to bomb this area, all of a sudden in the sky, they see this Franciscan friar. Did they know he was a Franciscan friar? Probably not. To them, they're just like, whoa, there's a dude out here. And it actually prevented them from bombing. And later on, they ended up not bombing this town. They went back, and a couple of these pilots went and visited this town where they were supposed to bomb. And they actually, the craziest part, they met Padre Pio. And what is so cool is that not only they're like, oh, wow, this is just like another friar, they're like, wait, they recognized him immediately. And they're like, this is the guy that we saw in the sky. And it's so crazy to me. Like, imagine just being a pilot and you're just kind of doing your job and you are on this mission, and the mission is prevented because you literally just see somebody up there in the sky. And later on, you meet who now they were to know as Padre Pio. And it's crazy. And I know there was so many stories like this as well.
That is insane to me. It's insane to me that he appeared to them in the sky. It wasn't like a vision kind of thing. Like these pilots describe the actual 3D figure of someone in Capuchin wear these brown dark robes, and like they could distinctively say that exact robe and that exact person was up in the sky, and we tried everything we could, and we just couldn't bomb this town. So then they just left.
Again, you talk about, I know at the beginning you mentioned like the levitating. I mean, talk about bilocation and being here in the sky with them, but also still potentially doing mass or doing something else or probably hearing confessions, right?
There's so much more about St. Padre Pio's life that we could share for hours and for days. Daniel, for you, what are some parts of Padre Pio's life that resonates with your faith life?
It definitely is his willingness to continue to do the Lord's work. When all the chips were stacked against him, he was having all these spiritual battles, these spiritual temptations. He was having people not believe in him. And even in the easy temptation of falling into the pride of all the fame, right? This was a very popular man at this time. And as you said, there's people literally waiting weeks just to sit down in confession with him. It's so easy for all of this appraisal and all this approval to just get to his head, and for him to start thinking that he is greater than other people that he's sitting down in confession with. And he is greater than the priests and the bishops that are telling him he's full of crap. And he could have just been like, you know what? You guys don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I know, and God gave me these gifts, and I am just better. but he didn't. And he still lived that humble life. And it's such a testament to the life of discerning priesthood that at the end of the day, the reason that I'm here and the reason that all these seminarians even go to seminary and the reason that priests are priests is because it's not about their plans. It's not about their fame. It's not about their recognition, but it's about doing something for Christ, somebody that's bigger than themselves. So bringing people closer to him. And Padre Pio is one of the biggest examples of that, that he just completely gave himself, completely gave all of his desires, his temptations, his pride away to just serve the Lord at the highest level. And that's something that really sticks with me.
When someone receives the actual wounds of Christ and receives visions and actually sees the Lord, you would probably respond with a lot of pride and with a lot of willingness to be like, wait a second, why would you guys censor me for someone who I saw the Lord and I have these wounds on my hand? Would you not want me to go and be an influencer and try to win over all of these people? And but you're right, like his greatest mark is his humility and his willingness to submit and surrender. And that's hard for me. Like that is really difficult for me to say, well, Lord, I feel like I am not really understood and seen by the people around me, and that is frustrating. But Padre Pio's response is, thank you, Lord, and I am willing to go in the path that you have for me, even if it doesn't make any sense for me at all.
Yeah, which is such a blessing to be able to witness. Just that somebody that did have all of this and still, like we talk about again, just being able to be humble through all of that. What about you though? What from Padre Pio's life, what really sticks out to you, or do you feel like you can reflect your life off of his?
For me, it's actually after he died. I've been reading a lot of stories, encounters from people of this century, the 21st century, of people who still pray for St. Padre Pio's intercession. And a lot of them pray for usually a healing, a very hard and difficult disease or illness that they may have in their life. But hearing their stories, what I'm amazed to know is Padre Pio continues and he also desires for so many souls to be humble servants of God. And I sat with that a lot, and it really drew me closer to reflect on, have I been doing a good job of surrendering? Have I been doing a good job of saying, Lord, none of this makes sense, but in the same way that St. Padre Pio was willing to give up his own pride and give up his own control, please ask Padre Pio to help me with that too. And for saints that are exhumed and their bodies are still intact and incorrupt, that was the same for Padre Pio. He is one of the very few saints that when they exhumed his body, he did not decompose. And for me, I just always think of like, wait a second, that's weird. Uh, Fun fact, I helped out with a mortuary and I've helped embalm bodies before. And so like I've seen the whole process and I've helped with the process. And so to know that Padre Pio was incorrupt, there's still, even with the embalming fluids that we use, at some point you are going to decompose. But for Padre Pio's body to be exhumed in 2008, and now I believe it was 2008. I could be wrong, but for him now to still have an incorrupt body, that's wild to me. And I want to be as holy as he is.
And it's such a testament to his life, right? And which is like, it's so awesome. The last healing that he was able to be a part of was of his own, right? The stigmata being removed from his hands right before his death, and obviously encapsulating this body that has just stayed undecomposed for his entire life. But it's just so crazy that all of these miracles and healings and being there and praying with people and helping them overcome cancer through Jesus and overcome all these illnesses for him to be able to receive healing himself right before his death. Um, and I haven't thought a lot about what my last words would be if I knew the day that I was going to die. Um, but it's so amazing to hear because Padre Pio didn't die until 1968. He was already a little bit older. And I mean, you probably even have, I mean, my grandparents, I'm pretty sure were alive. They definitely were alive at this point. Like my parents were born in the 70s, right? And just to still have these stories not that long ago of him, but the last things that he said was he whispered the name of Jesus and Mary to be able to eventually go off. And it's such a crazy full circle moment to where when he was a kid, he would see those visions of Jesus and Mary to now being able to whisper their names on his deathbed.
What a joy to know that there are saints who work their tail off, but in their own way. And Padre Pio is a great example of that. And I know for a fact that I will never have a crazy saint story like Saint Padre Pio with my Stigmatas and Bilocation and knowing the hearts of people. But it's beautiful to recognize that the Lord's saint story for me is only written just for me.
Yeah.
And fun fact, there are videos of Padre Pio on YouTube. So if you want to see his hands and his mittens covering up his stigmatas, go check it out on YouTube. Just search up St. Padre Pio at Mass. But these are the saints that prove to us that that is something we can also achieve is sainthood.
And our lives, as again, Tom had mentioned, while maybe we don't have these glorious stories, God is still calling us to be saints as well. And he's still calling us to be followers of him. And I just always remember back to when I was doing Totus Tuus when I was a little kid. And they would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And be like, oh, I want to be a pilot or something, or whatever the kids would say. And the team members were like, well, I want to be a saint. And I just remember always reflecting on that to where, dang, we should all want to be a saint eventually one day. And God calls us all to this. What a joy it was talking about this story of Padre Pio. And again, I don't know if we could do justice to all of the greatness of him in just this conversation here. There's so many more stories, and there's just so much impact that he has had as a saint and when he was living as well. What a joy, though, to be able to reflect and have these people that lived before us as examples and guides to be able to follow Jesus more closely.
So with that, we are hoping that you find some time to reflect on the life of St. Padre Pio, because in our short time of just doing and spending time in prayer with St. Padre Pio, it has inspired our hearts. And with that, again, this is the Come Holy Spirit podcast. I'm joined by my dear friend Daniel Ordonez, and as always, we are praying dearly for you.